My name is Marielle Dayton. I am 59 years old. The house was silent when my phone chimed sharp and lonely. The kind of sound that only rings in a room where someone has spent years giving more than she kept. I thought it was the bank again. Another alert reminding me of the $680,000 I had wired away money that came from selling my late husband's boatyard. The last piece of him I still had left. But when I picked up the phone, it wasn't a bank notification. It was my daughter, Grace. Her message was short, cold, surgical. Mom, my mother-in-law says it's best if you don't come to the wedding. My throat tightened. Not because I wasn't wanted, but because someone else had taken my place so easily. A woman I had met once. A woman who smelled like money and spoke like ownership. A woman who decided overnight that she was the mother now. I stared at the message at the wedding I sacrificed everything for and typed one word, noted. Something inside me cracked cleanly, not like a heart breaking, but like a lock opening. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel responsible. I felt awake, and before the sun even rose, I already knew exactly who I would call and exactly what I was about to set in motion. The clock on the wall ticked softly as I set the phone down. The air outside pressed against the windows in that heavy Charleston humidity. I reached for the lamp, then stopped, my hands steadying themselves on the nightstand. I didn't touch the transfers yet, not because I was unsure, but because silence finally felt more powerful than action. The house around me wasn't just filled with objects, it was filled with the life I had held together alone. My husband's framed nautical maps, Grace's old piano, and drawers of receipts from debts I had erased quietly, methodically, hoping that keeping everything in order would keep my family whole. I had spent a lifetime believing that order was love, that if I kept fixing, patching, paying, then the people I loved would never fall apart. Tonight, something in that belief shifted, quietly, irreversibly. The phone buzzed again, another message, this time from Daniel's number. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I turned off the lamp, pulled a thin blanket over my legs, and closed my eyes. Sleep came quickly, sharp, unexpected, almost like relief. By morning, the decision was already sealed inside me. Calm as an envelope waiting to be delivered, I poured myself a cup of coffee, but the bitterness barely touched what had settled in my chest. 682,000. The number echoed like a ghost. I remember the first time Grace called me crying. It's Daniel's business. Mom, she whispered, he just needs a little help until the investors come through. How much is a little? A long silence. 120,000. I was still working 12-hour days at the accounting firm. The mortgage on the boatyard my husband left me was nearly paid off. Selling it had never been part of the plan, but neither was watching my daughter drown in debt from promises Daniel couldn't keep. Why isn't his family helping? I asked. Grace hesitated. Daniel's mom doesn't fund anything she can't control. She says startups are a waste of real money. A first glimpse of Elaine Corrigan. When I told Grace I'd cover it, she sobbed. You're the only one who believes in us. I wanted to believe it too, leave it. But a year later, the calls returned new phone numbers, the same panic. Just this once. Mom, we're rebranding. The new location is perfect. I stared at the calculator on my desk. The numbers refused to make sense. Grace, you two are already over your heads. Daniel's mom says debt is part of growth. She snapped. She says you wouldn't understand. She handles real money. The tone wasn't hers, it was Elaine's. In the end, I sold the boatyard. The buyer, a young man with salt-streaked hair, asked gently, Are you sure that place was your husband's pride? I know, I said, but right now, it's my daughter's lifeline. When the wire went through, I stood in front of the empty slip and told myself it was worth it. Grace would have stability. Daniel would prove himself. Maybe I could finally rest. Instead, I watched from a distance as their lives filled with the kind of ease money buys, the kind that forgets where it came from. I drained my coffee and glanced at my silent phone. I hadn't bought peace. I had bought distance, polished, expensive, and absolute. I met Elaine Corrigan for the first time at a downtown brunch Grace insisted on. I went because mothers always go. Elaine arrived late, her perfume reaching the table before she did, floral and expensive. She gave me a smile that measured more than it greeted. "Marielle," she said smoothly, taking the seat beside Grace. "You've done so much for the children. Daniel tells me you've been incredibly generous." "I help where I can," I replied. Her eyes swept over my simple blouse, quick, assessing. "That's admirable. In families like ours, we value generosity, though some people confuse it with obligation." Grace stiffened. "Mom's always been supportive." Elaine lifted her mimosa. "Oh, I'm sure she meant well. Some women build families. Others," her gaze flicked to me, "keep the books." The table fell silent. Grace laughed nervously. I smiled. "And some women know the difference between help and control." Elaine's expression tightened just for a moment. She hadn't expected pushback. For the rest of the meal, she spoke only to Grace Florals. Seating charts, signature cocktails, every detail of the wedding. Grace and I had once dreamed of planning together. Each question excluded me with perfect politeness. When the bill came, Elaine reached for it, pausing just long enough to make it sting. "Marielle, dear, you've paid enough. Let me get this." Grace pretended to scroll her phone. I nodded. "Of course, outside." Our reflections stretched across the glass doors, Elaine poised. Grace unconsciously leaning toward her. For a moment, they looked like mother and daughter, and I realized I was the one fading from the frame, one polite smile at a time. 6 months earlier, I had sat across from my lawyer, Ruth Calder, in her narrow office above Meeting Street. She was sharp-eyed and direct, the kind of woman who never wasted a word. "You're certain about this amount?" she asked. $680,000 isn't help. "Marielle, it's leverage." "I know." I said, "If I don't do it, they'll lose everything. The condo, the investors, Grace's future." Ruth nodded once. "Then we do it properly. No kitchen table signatures, no confusion later. We notarize it, clear transfer, clear repayment plan." She slid another document toward me. "And a clause if they cannot repay within 6 months. You gain a 50% ownership stake. No drama, just law." Her voice softened. "You can love them, Marielle, and still protect yourself." When Grace and Daniel arrived later that week, I didn't meet them at home. We sat again in Ruth's office. A notary already waiting with her logbook. Daniel barely skimmed the pages. "This is just for taxes." "Right," Ruth offered a professional smile. "It documents the loan and the repayment terms. Standard and notarized so no one misunderstands." Grace looked at me, uncertain. "Mom, you really don't have to." "I do," I said gently, "and it needs to be clean." The notary watched as they signed Daniel quickly, Grace with trembling hands. Then she added her signature, pressed the gold seal into place, and handed everything back to Ruth. "It's official," Ruth said. "Protected, clear." Grace kissed my cheek. "I'll pay you back." I promise. I wanted to believe her. But Ruth's words echoed quietly. You can love them and still need proof. When I returned to pick up the finalized documents, the clerk handed me a crisp folder stamped with the Corrigan Stone name. I placed it carefully in my bag. At home, I tucked it into my desk drawer beneath my husband's old insurance papers, where he once kept every important truth until the day it was needed. For months, it stayed there, untouched, while the wedding grew louder, grander, more public. To them, those papers were a formality, a kindness. They never realized it was my first act of defense, the thin line between devotion and disappearance. I didn't see the wedding in person, only the version meant for the world. By noon, photos were everywhere, Grace in lace, Daniel in a navy suit, the Corrigan family arranged beneath fairy lights like a magazine spread. Elaine had curated every inch of it. Chandeliers, champagne towers, live violins, the kind of wedding people label old money. I sat in an airport lounge, my flight boarding soon, scrolling through image after image. One showed Grace with Daniel's parents, her hand resting on Elaine's arm. My absence fit perfectly into the frame, as if I'd never been expected there. I set the phone down, let the noise of the terminal blur gate calls, suitcase wheels, laughter. Life moved on, even when love didn't. Meanwhile, on that immaculate lawn, reality entered the celebration. A courier stepped into the tent plain suit. Single manila envelope. Delivery for Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan Stone, he said, clear and steady. Daniel grinned, thinking it was a gift. Grace leaned in. Elaine watched like a queen, awaiting applause. Open it. Darling, she urged. Daniel tore the seal. Notary stamps. Legal signatures. The clause in bold. His smile vanished. Elaine's face drained. She snatched the top page. Her voice broke. It's a transfer of ownership. Half the condo. To her. The music wobbled. A server nearly dropped a tray. Guests stared. Phones half raised. Grace's hands shook around the papers. Mom. No. Back in the lounge. The boarding announcement echoed. I picked up my suitcase. Calm settling over me like something long overdue. I didn't check the notifications lighting up my phone. I didn't need to. The wedding sparkled beautifully until the truth landed in their hands and shattered every illusion they had built. Part 7, The Collapse. Revised version. Final. According to Ruth, the silence after Daniel opened the envelope didn't last almost a minute. It lasted exactly 54 seconds. Long enough for shock to settle. Long enough for two families to realize the wedding had just been split clean in half. Daniel reread the clause twice, his jaw tightening with every line. Beside him, Elaine's hand hovered over the papers, fingers trembling not with grief, but with rage. Grace's voice broke first. Daniel, say something. He didn't look at her. He kept staring at my signature. Elaine snatched the documents again, her voice sharpening into a whisper that trembled under the weight of humiliation. This is a legal transfer. Half the condo is now hers. Gasps rippled through the tent. Someone recorded it, of course they did. These people photographed everything. Even a family imploding. Grace shook her head. Desperate. No. It was a misunderstanding. Mom said Daniel finally lifted his eyes. You told me the money was a gift. Grace. His voice was so cold the violinist actually stopped playing. Grace blinked hard, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I thought Daniel. I thought Mom wouldn't enforce it. We needed the money for the venue, for the investors. I didn't think. You didn't think at all, he cut in. You signed legal documents without reading them. Elaine stepped between them, trying and failing to steady her tone. This is a setup. She's punishing you. I told you she would ruin the wedding. Women like her always do. Daniel rounded on his mother. No. Mom, women like you ruin things by pretending everything's fine while the house is burning down. Elaine froze, stunned. A champagne flute toppled behind them. Guests whispered. Someone audibly said, "Oh my God." Grace reached for Daniel's arm, but he pulled back. You lied to me, he said quietly. You lied to everyone. No, Daniel, please, but he stepped away, leaving her grasping at empty air. A server tried to discreetly set down a tray. Instead, a glass slipped, shattering at Grace's feet. The photographer lowered his camera slowly, unsure whether to keep filming the wedding or the wreckage. Elaine's composure finally cracked. Wine spilled down her dress in a trembling streak. "This is humiliation," she hissed. Public humiliation. And she was right, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one in control of it. Meanwhile, miles away, I sat in the airport terminal, my boarding pass tucked inside my book. The world around me moved normally, travelers rushing past. Children chattering, announcements echoing overhead. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it arrives sealed in a manila envelope. As the plane began boarding, I stood and lifted my bag. Charleston glowed through the windows, warm, distant, finally losing its hold on me. On the screen of my phone, notifications kept lighting up. I didn't open a single one. Some truths, once delivered, don't need to be revisited. 2 days later, my phone buzzed across the cafe table, Grace's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring once. Then I answered. Her voice cracked immediately. "Mom, please, I need to talk to you." I didn't rush to fill the silence. She inhaled shakily. "They're furious," she said. "Daniel's parents. They're saying I humiliated them. The investors pulled out after the video went around. Everyone thinks I lied about the money." Her breath hitched. "Daniel won't come home. Elaine won't speak to me. Everything is falling apart." I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the rhythm calm me. "You told him the money was a gift," I said. "I thought, Mom, I thought you wouldn't enforce it. We were drowning. I kept thinking if I just held everything together." "You didn't hold anything together," I said quietly. "You hid the cracks and called it peace." She went silent. For the first time in a long time, she didn't have an excuse ready. "What am I supposed to do now?" she whispered. "Start by reading what you sign," I told her, and by telling the truth finally. Her voice was small. "You wanted to humiliate me." "No," I said, steady and calm. "If humiliation happened, it came from your choices, not mine." Another pause, a long, uneven breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." An apology. Late. Shaken. Imperfect. "It's not about sorry, Grace," I said. "It's about learning. You created this, and you're the one who has to climb out of it." Outside the cafe window, people crossed the street, laughing, carrying groceries, sipping iced drinks. Ordinary life continued, even when hearts cracked open. Grace's breathing softened on the line, a small voice, almost a child's again. "Do you still want me in your life?" I looked out at the city, bright, indifferent, alive. "I want a daughter," I said finally. "Not someone who remembers me only when she needs saving." The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was a boundary settling into place. When the call ended, my hands were steady. My coffee had gone cold again, but for the first time in years, my heart wasn't. It was late afternoon when her car rolled to a stop by the curb. Grace stepped out slowly. No makeup, no jewelry, no curated apology. Just a woman, facing the consequences she had spent years avoiding. She stood at the gate for a moment, almost afraid of touching it. "Mom," her voice was thin but steady. "Can we talk?" I stayed on the porch chair, legs crossed, posture calm. "You can come in," I said, not warm, not cold, just factual. She walked halfway up the steps and stopped, as if unsure whether she deserved to stand any closer. "I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "Start where things went wrong." I replied, "That's usually where truth lives." Grace swallowed hard. "Daniel's gone," she said. "Elaine won't take my calls. Their investors pulled out. People think I lied about the financing. I can't fix any of it. You lied to yourself long before you lied to them, I said. She flinched, but didn't defend herself. Elaine told me choosing her family meant security, she said. She told me letting you come to the wedding would embarrass them. She said people like us. People like us, I repeated quietly. Grace nodded, tears forming. I thought she could protect us. I thought being accepted by them meant stability. And now you're standing in the ruins of that belief, I said, and learning that borrowed crowns always fall. Her chin trembled. Can I fix any of this? She asked. You can fix yourself, I said. Everything else. You may have to let go. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. For the first time in years, she listened. What do you want me to do? She whispered. I don't want anything, I said. Wanting is what got us here. You decide who you are from here on. Grace nodded slowly, accepting responsibility, not begging for rescue. Thank you for letting me come in, she whispered. I'm letting you step inside, I said. Whether you stay is up to the person you choose to become. She finally climbed the remaining steps. Not forgiven, not restored, but accountable. 3 weeks passed before Grace returned again, but this time, she didn't come to cry or justify. She came with truth. A thick envelope in her hands, shoulders squared, eyes clear. I need you to see this, she said. Inside were 2 sets of papers. The first, her divorce documents. Daniel signed yesterday. She said, he admitted he was more committed to his parents' image than to our marriage. No tears. No dramatics. Just acceptance. The second, the full transfer of the condo. The rest of it is yours, she said quietly. All of it. I'm walking away from that life for good. I looked through the documents. Legal. Final. Clean. You didn't have to do this. I said, I did, she whispered. Because I finally understand the difference between help and sacrifice. Before I could reply, a sharp knock echoed through the gate. Not Grace. Elaine Corrigan stood there, gripping the iron bars like they were the last stable thing in her collapsing world. Her silk blouse was wrinkled, her posture shaken. Marielle, she said breathlessly, we need to talk. No, I replied calmly. You need something. She flinched. Investors think I manipulated the financing, she hissed. I need you to tell them I didn't, please. Just say nothing. Retract the notice. Let this go. I walked closer, meeting her eyes without blinking. Elaine, I said, you built your reputation on control. Now you're seeing what happens when the truth stands on its own. Her breath broke. This could ruin me. No, I said softly. This reveals you. She gripped the bars tighter. Please, she whispered. I'm begging you. You played a long game, Elaine, I said, but you played it with the wrong woman. Then I closed the gate. Firm, final, and without anger. Just truth. That night, I placed the folder every contract, every clause, every signature into a cedar box inside my closet. Not to protect myself, but because I no longer needed to carry it. The fight was done, and I had won quietly, cleanly, without ever raising my voice. I stepped onto the veranda and switched on the lantern my husband once hung. Warm light spilled across the yard steady. Grounded. Mine. Grace watched the glow beside me, her voice soft. It's beautiful, she said. It's mine, I replied. Then, after a breath, and maybe, someday, this home can hold both of us again. Grace didn't cry. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just nodded, grateful for a door that was no longer locked, but no longer wide open either. Not revenge, not reconciliation, just a beginning, on my terms, under a light that finally felt like it belonged to me.